There is a lot of information and hype around AI right now, but is it really true? Let's try to figure out what is reality and what is fiction. But first and foremost, what is this AI thing? AI is such a general umbrella term that not many people know about it. Recently, because of OpenAI and ChatGPT, this word AI has been thrown a lot, but the ChatGPT's technology is actually called large language models, and they come under the form of natural language processing within the machine learning subset. And in this video, I'm actually focusing on the large language models and not AI in general as a broader context. So with that said, let's dive into myth number one. Is generative AI going to take over our world? This is a common misconception, and it's mostly generated from movies like Terminator, where the machines learn and evolve so quickly that they eventually want to destroy humans. It's unlikely to happen in the real world. Just like with anything else, machines can be built for good and they can be built for bad. So it just depends on what the application is and what it's actually being used for. You could argue that rockets are a really bad thing because they're used for killing people, or you could take the same underlying technology like rocket propulsion and you can send people up to space. So it really just depends on the use case and how we actually use it. So it is not the case where the machine will automatically figure out a way to destroy us, because it can't do that. Generative models, in a way, the very first fundamental basic thing, all they're doing is predicting the next likely word. And they are so good at predicting the next word, it feels like they're able to reason and it feels like they have an understanding. But in reality, they don't. So is AI really going to take over the world? Probably not. If we wanted it to, probably yes. The second most common thing is AI going to take over jobs. I'm a software engineer. I use generative models every single day, and I can tell you that it's definitely not going to replace me or my job. It will replace some really boring aspects of my job, and if my job was solely just to Google and get a right answer to a question, then yes, I would be out of a job. But that's not all what I do in my role. My role requires complex thinking about designs, communication, and dealing with people, with managers, and with all of the different complexities that come with actually delivering a really complex problem with a high-level view and with a vision of the future. Yeah, those are all the things that generative AI can't do. It just mimics those things. It may seem like it's doing those things, but in reality, it does not have any semantic understanding between all of those different words and different things. Generative AI will automate some parts of the job, and if your job unfortunately falls onto the line where it can be completed by a script, then yes, which also would indicate that it's a very laborious job. Not to say that's a bad thing, but machines can do it much faster. And sure, those people might lose their jobs. This technology will also create new and better jobs. Maybe you could do the same thing but faster, 100 times being more productive instead of just doing it manually. It will automate some jobs, but it will definitely help streamline and make our existing jobs a lot better and faster. Myth number three, generative AI is fully autonomous. Again, it comes back to the same concept where these generative models are not understanding, they're just predicting the next likely word. These generative systems are not intelligent, they're not able to think like humans, they're not able to reason like human, and they only mimic those things. They can't actually function out of their design scope. What I mean by that is, if you design this generative system to complete a single task, it is very unlikely that it can complete another task of a different variation. Let me explain. So when you're creating a system in generative AI, you're using some specific prompts, you're using a specific model that has been adjusted and fine-tuned for this single task. And if you try to take this model and this system and try to apply it anywhere else, that becomes really difficult because it only knows the data about that very specific task. Whereas if you take a human, we can actually adapt to various different things. We can relate from different topics to different concepts. An example would be, if you learn about farming, you can and abstract some high-level concept that you can use to apply in other areas of your life. Like for example, let's just say farming, like you prepare the soil, you make sure you protect the seed and grow it in a way that yields the best crop that is possible. And you can apply that same analogy to, I don't know, software engineering, where you do the hard work initially of planning out and doing the things sequentially. Then the system gets made, is actually well thought out, and the results are actually meaningful and better for you. And this is just one example where we can relate to different things. We can bring in different types of knowledge all together into solving a problem. This is what generative can't do. And these systems are highly tuned to do this. We tried it. We actually tried to make this generative system to do very big and different things at the same time. They're more general than specific. And solving problems require specific things and specific tasks to be completed, which only specific generative systems can do. Myth number 4, AI can actually make ethical decisions. The problem is that we would assume that AI always is unbiased. The way these generative models are actually trained is based on their data. So if the data itself is biased towards being positive or towards being negative or towards being this subject A or towards subject B or whatever the case would be, these models are very specific and towards the data that they're being trained on. So the data in itself could be biased, which would result in a biased output. In reality, you can ask these models to be as ethical as possible, but their constraint is in their data which they have been trained on. And unfortunately, most of these generative models and all of these things are trained on biased data. Even we as humans, we know some biasness towards different things. There is some biases that are unconsciously that we're applying on things, and there are some biases that we don't even know that we're biased about. And that actually translates into the data that we actually feed to the generative models as well. You can't have a generative system that is completely unbiased, that is completely ethical. It only knows what it knows, and it tries to generate and predict what the next likely thing would be from the things that it knows. Myth number 5. AI is actually very dangerous. Generative systems can be used for bad purposes if they're designed it to be that way. But here's the thing, that banning these generative systems or being scared of them is not really beneficial to the society. For example, if you take a motor, like a very small motor, the way and the rotations of the motor and that technology of a motor, this motor is being used across various different applications. Sure, you could argue that these motors are actually being used in missiles or in weapon systems or in whatever thing there is, but it's stupid to ban the technology. Hey, we're scared of the motor. This can be used for making weapons or any other destructive thing. That's why we're not going to use it. But we don't do that. We actually have restrictions on the applications of the core technology. So some applications of motors like building a weapon system or anything like that, those would not be allowed, but other things could be allowed. Generative AI is the same thing. Banning generative AI is not going to really help, or it will actually damage the innovations and things that we can actually make from them. I do agree that some applications of generative AI should be banned, but not the core technology itself. Just like with anything else, you can use something for good, and you can use that same thing for bad. There should be a lot of restriction on some nefarious applications of these generative systems, but there should be any legal implications on using these generative systems using for good or at personal devices. The main thing that you would need to understand is just that generative models are just predicting the next likely word. They don't have any consciousness. They don't have any reasoning capability, though it may seem like it, and they're not harmful. Some of the applications where these generative models can prove to be very destructive, but majority of the things, if we use it responsibly and correctly, this is where we will advance and improve our lives a lot better than what we had before. Until next time.